The Cincinnati Reds need to stop worrying about getting back together with their ex.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, and I am a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan. I've been hosting this podcast, whether a solo or a co-host with Steve Offenbaker, for the last 7 years now, and I'm glad to be talking Reds baseball here with you every single day, all throughout the year, all throughout the offseason. Make sure that you're along with us every step of the way. Locked On Reds is for the Reds fan that knows what happened. They want to know why. And on today's show, we'll talk about what is most likely to happen this offseason. Look, we all have plans, we all have hopes that the Reds can enact certain ideas this offseason, but what is most likely to happen? That's coming up later on in today's podcast. Jake Fraley needs to get the power back on, but what does that mean for him? I'll tell you here in a few minutes, but I want to start with this rumor that I saw linking the Reds to an outfielder that they used to employ, and could they bring him back this season? That's all coming up on today's episode that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, the Cincinnati Reds, they've been linked to Jesse Winker, and I don't think that should happen. I do not think that the Reds need to go for Jesse Winker at all. Mark C. Healy, a guy who covers the New York Mets for radio and for SiriusXM and all this other stuff, tweeted out on Monday that he said, "I've heard two things Mets fans are not going to like. I just want to say that they are from sources outside the Mets. The first is Jesse Winker may be close to a deal with the Reds." And then he says something about Pete Alonso, but that doesn't matter for Reds purposes. Jesse Winker may be close to a deal with the Reds. What? But then he clarified on Tuesday morning, he said, an update on Winker. There is mutual interest between the player and the Reds, but, quote, maybe close to a deal, unquote, isn't accurate. Also told that the Mets' interest in bringing Winker back remains strong. They can have him. I would like to see Jesse Winker remain with the Mets. Look, we have great memories when it comes to Jesse Winker, right? We had the fun part when he was facing the Mets and he was waving goodbye to Mets fans, and there were fun times with Jesse Winker as a Red. Let's call it what it is, though. The Reds need outfield help, and Jesse Winker ain't it. There's two reasons why I think that's the case. He doesn't hit left-handed pitching. Never has. He didn't when he was with the Reds. He didn't after he left the Reds. He still doesn't. Last year, against lefties, he was limited to 104 at-bats. He had just 7 extra base hits, 6 doubles, 1 homer. He's never put that into his utility belt. He also still doesn't field well. In fact, we talked about how Spencer Steer, and I have said many a time how I'm not a big fan of Spencer Steer in the outfield for defensive reasons. Jesse Winker's worse. In fact, he's like twice as worse. Jesse Winker's outs above average last year in the outfield was -11, which was in the bottom 10 for any fielder, not just outfielders. Literally anyone at every position Jesse Winker was in. He was the 7th worst fielder in all of Major League Baseball among qualified fielders. And look, there's this other thing too. He had a bit of a bounce back year last season, and that's probably what you're thinking. Man, well, I don't know, Jeff. Like, he kind of bounced back a little bit. He could be an interesting option, even with his bounce back. He had just a .405 slugging. And I get it. To compare Jesse Winker to Teoscar Hernandez is a goofy thing to even begin with, but just for reference, Teoscar Hernandez slugged over 100 points higher. The Reds can get better in the outfield. Both Teoscar Hernandez and Jesse Winker are free agents. Now, they're going to cost a lot differently. I get that. But this is bargain shopping. In the beginning of December, the rumors linking mutual interest between the Reds and Jesse Winker before the winter meetings even take place. Jesse Winker is not a guy that you should be running to the podium to sign. Jesse Winker is not a guy that's going to move the needle for this outfield. He's just not. He is Jake Fraley with a smidge more pop, a lot worse defense, and a lot slower on the base paths. That's who he is. In fact, when you look at even further metrics and stuff, and I love StatCast, I love Baseball Savant, love looking at that and trying to understand players a little bit better through the numbers that they provide, and they started providing this bat speed metric this past year. They measure how quickly a hitter's bat gets through the zone. They said that Jesse Winker's was at 69 miles per hour, which put him in the bottom 18% of the league. I don't know how that gets much better, which means that I don't know how well his slugging is going to improve. Now, it's going to improve a little bit. Any hitter's slugging who can get a line drive is going to improve when they come to Great American Ballpark. But is that going to be enough? My answer is no. That's not who the Reds should be looking at here. The outfield is in need of an everyday player. Because right now, and we talked about it on an episode last week, but right now you can squint and you can see a platoon between Jake Fraley and Stuart Fairchild. It would work. If you bring Jesse Winker into the equation, does that mean that you're then platooning him with Spencer Steer? Maybe. But does that equal a good outfielder? I mean, against right-handed pitching last year, Jesse Winker did slug higher than 405, but he only slugged 422. He wasn't lighting the world on fire against right-handed pitching. He had a total of 14 home runs last year. Again, bounce back season as it were, that's still not that great. There are still better options. I would still rather have Tyler O'Neill. I'd rather have Jurickson Profar. I'd rather have Michael Conforto than Jesse Winker, and they're both left-handed. I don't see why this should be the move. And I get it. There's this feeling, and we do this every offseason. And quite frankly, we do it a lot closer to spring training because we begin to look at who's still available. But we do this thing where we're like, oh, hey, former Red, perfect fit, knows the city, knows the town, knows the fan base. And while people liked Jesse Winker, remember, the Reds need production. They don't need a fun face. They don't need a great personality. Jonathan India had all of those things. To get rid of a personality who doesn't quite produce as much as you would like, and then sign a guy that's pretty much the same, don't think that's the way. I think the Reds have so many other options, and we'll talk a lot about the different avenues that they could take and things like that later on in today's show. But Jesse Winker isn't the way. I think it's fun, and I even looked a little bit deeper into the guy who tweeted, Mark C. Healy. I looked a little bit deeper into what he talks about and his offseason stuff, and he even mentioned, he's like, I'm not a guy that likes to talk about rumors that were started based on player agents. I talk to people within organizations. I talk to people who are closer to what's actually the decisions that are being made. And so I like that. That's good. He's reporting things that are a little bit more substantiated, which is why I'm worried about this, which is why I don't love this. Because think about this team. We talked about it on yesterday's podcast. If you missed it, go back and check it out. But the Reds, while they haven't spent a ton of money, the money that they have spent isn't been that well spent. It's a great sentence. Let me rephrase that. The Reds haven't been the best spenders when it comes to free agency. And I don't think going back and signing Jesse Winker would be the way to improve that. The Reds, you remember that trade of Winker and Suarez, and you remember how we were all just so mad at that trade, and how could they do that? And quite frankly, I mean, Suarez has been solid, but on the Jesse Winker side of things, that went totally the opposite way of the way I thought he was going to be the player that we missed the most in that deal. And it's far and away been Eugenio Suarez. Jesse Winker hasn't had that great of a career since leaving Cincinnati. I don't know if a a return to scenery is what would fix that. I just think that the Reds need to stop thinking about calling their exes in this case. They don't need Jesse Winker. But the reason that Winker makes little sense is because the Reds already have a lefty platoon with Jake Fraley, who needs to get the power back on. I'll tell you why that's easier said than done, though, coming up next. The best way, the only way to get to your next live event is with Game Time. Whether it be at a sporting event, a theater performance, some sort of concert, maybe even a comedy event, they are all on Game Time. And Game Time's got a lot of great ways to get you to the venue. They've got views from your seat, so you know exactly what you'll be looking at. They've got all-in pricing. That way you're not surprised by some fee right there before you hit checkout. And they've got great last-minute deals. The closer you get to the event starting, the better the prices get. Steve and I do this all the time where we go down to the banks, post up at a great spot to hang out, wait till close to first pitch, and then we grab our tickets over on Game Time. Plus, if you create an account today and you use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, you'll save $20 off your first purchase. So you're getting great last-minute deals and $20 off with that promo code LOCKEDONMLB for your first purchase. What time is it? It's game time. We are talking Reds today, all day, every month, all year long. Make sure you subscribe to get at least 30 minutes of Red Stock in your feed every single day. All right, so Jake Fraley, he's a guy that we've been talking about a lot this offseason because this past year just didn't quite live up to the expectation. Jake Fraley had a solid batting average, an okay on-base percentage, but a pretty pedestrian slugging percentage, something that we really thought needed to improve for next year. But let's consider this a little bit because as he needs more power, it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not like he was just missing one thing or getting unlucky or something like that. That's something we love to talk about a lot here on the Locked On Reds podcast. Everydayers will know there are certain statistics that you can point to and say a guy was getting unlucky. Even though his numbers looked bad, they should have been better. The numbers for Jake Fraley say that he's about where he should be, if not getting a little lucky. Because for his career, he's been a well below average quality of contact hitter. League average for average exit velocity for a given hitter is 88.6 miles an hour. That's the speed of the ball off the bat when they make contact in play. His, for his entire career, has been 4 miles an hour slower than that, at 84 miles an hour. And last year, it was no different. Last year was 84.3 miles an hour. And then when you even consider his hard hit percentage, which a hard hit ball, according to StatCast, is any ball that is hit 95 miles an hour or harder. For his career, he's 8% below league average. Again, it's league average is like 36%. He's at 28%. So he's just not a guy that hits the ball very hard very often. Every so often he'll get a hold of it, but even his max exit velocity, the hardest hit ball that he hit last year, was ranked 227th among major league hitters. He just didn't get all of it. And one of the biggest issues is his bat speed is okay. We talked about Jesse Winker's bat speed being bad. Jake Fraley's bat speed is league average. But where he really struggled last year was he did not get the barrel of the bat on the ball. A lot less barrels in 2024 than they were in 2023. And if you're not familiar with that stat, that's just simply saying the fat part of the bat, the best part of the baseball bat, hitting the baseball, how well was the hitter at doing that? And he wasn't very good at it last year. In fact, he had half as many barrels per plate appearance as he had in 2023. But really the big underlying problem is when he did make contact last year, he hit the ball on the ground a lot. Now, it was league average, 44%, but for him, it's 4% higher than his career average, 6% higher than it was in 2023. What I'm saying is the ball was on the ground too much. He didn't hit it very hard, and he hit it on the ground, which meant that if he got a hit, it was a single. And he had some doubles, very few home runs. He only had 5 home runs last year. He had 15 the year before, so it's not to say that we're talking about a 30 home run guy that somehow fell off the table and now he can't hit anything at all. He's not really ever going to be that big of a power guy. So to get his power back, what does that mean? It means we need more doubles. We need gap power. I think that's really where his strength lies, and he didn't get that last year because of keeping the ball on the ground too much, not getting a lot of line drives. It's funny because it's not usually, when you look at statistics for players and stuff like this, it's not usually so 1-for-1 as it was with Jake Fraley, where the 6% that he had year over year gain for ground balls was the 6% drop that you saw in fly balls. He just wasn't hitting the ball in the air that much. And all you need to do sometimes at Great American Ballpark is hit the ball in the air. TJ Friedl is a perfect example of that, because TJ Friedl is not a power hitter. But when he lifts it out of Great American, because it's so easy to do over there on that right field corner. But I think that overall, like, Jake Fraley is a guy that is never going to be that middle of the order batter. I think even when the Reds put him there, it was either lack of options or just bad managing, which seemed to come to fruition last year. But he wasn't a middle of the order guy. As much as the Reds were trying to sell us on that, that's not who he is. He should be a guy that should be looked at to get on base. And I know Steve loves to do this, so I'm kind of going to throw him a bone. Steve will be back later on this week. We just had a little bit of a, incongruity when it came to his work schedule and what we were available to record. But Steve loves to talk about, setting the lineup up in like two waves, where you have your on-base guys, your power guys, and then around the fifth spot, you reset it. You get some on-base guys, you get some power guys, and then it resets. It's a lineup in waves. Jake Fraley would be a perfect guy for that sort of a thing if he could walk more. Last year, he didn't walk very much. In fact, his career average, he walks about 10% of the time. Last year, he only walked 6.8% of the time. He was swinging the bat a lot more. He was making contact. He wasn't striking out a ton. It's not as if he traded walks for strikeouts, but he traded walks for weak contact. And I think he's got to be more patient this year. That's probably something we will see from him, because it's not as easy as it is to say, yeah, you just need to hit for more power. Okay, sure, I'm going to go in and hit for more power. But a guy like Jake Fraley could really benefit from being more patient, from taking more pitches, making longer at bats, getting that walk, getting on base. He's got the speed. We know that. Duke can steal a base, and Duke can take an extra base when you need him to. But I don't know that it's as easy as just saying, get more slugging percentage for Jake Fraley. I think ultimately, limiting his playing time against left-handed pitching, just making sure that he is facing right-handed pitching when it comes to what you're asking of him, and then you just kind of hope everything else improves, because he sees the ball better against right-handed pitching. He hits the ball harder against right-handed pitching, and he puts them where they ain't whenever there's a righty on the mound. He doesn't do any of that when lefties are there. He had a solid, it wasn't detrimental. You're gonna hear 230 and you're gonna say, well, that's not good. Based on some of the other guys we saw hit last year, 230 sounds pretty solid. But he had a 230 batting average against left-handed pitching last year. But it was in the slugging percentage where he slugged under 300 against lefties. That meant if he got a hit, it was a single. Period. That's not what you want. So limit those engagements, him against left-handed pitching. Keep him only in against righties, and let's see his on-base percentage jump up. Because as much as we would love to see his power jump up, I think it's going to be easier if he focuses on seeing more pitches, working more walks, and then he'll see better pitches to hit, and you could see that slugging percentage jump up like we think it can. But I think I really wanted to dive deep on that with Jake Fraley, because we've been talking about him a lot and just saying, well, he needs to get more power. There's more to it than that. And I think that, is the rumor about Jesse Winker being signed, is that linked to possibly trading Jake Fraley? I don't know. That's a possibility, because they're basically the same guy, like I mentioned, same guy, except Winker has more pop and a lot less defense and a lot less speed. I think I would rather have Jake Fraley than Jesse Winker. And I'm not really sure what his trade value is. So are you getting something that you absolutely need? Probably not. So, hitting for power might not be in his wheelhouse, but maybe the answer is taking more pitches, working more walks, and we'll see how everything else improves. But when it comes to this offseason, we all have hopes, and we have wishes, and we believe we know what the path forward should be for the Reds. But there's something important to consider in all of this. I'll tell you what that is coming up next. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need in one place when it comes to live bets in the NFL, because they've got stats, they've got scores, they've got all the biggest highlights and play-by-play and so much more, all on the same place that you make your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And while you're there, you can take a look at next year's odds to win the National League. FanDuel has the Reds at 33-1 odds to get that NL pennant. Those odds are actually the same as the St. Louis Cardinals and better than the San Francisco Giants. Very interesting. Obviously, they're still long, but there's always a shot. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Make sure to take us with you wherever you go when you can't watch us on YouTube, because we're on every podcasting app there is, so you can listen to the audio version of the podcast. That way, you don't have to be driving and trying to watch YouTube at the same time. Then you get pulled over. Nobody wants that. So listen to us on your favorite podcasting app. All right, one of the things, and I want to close out with this, one of the things that we talk about a lot in the offseason are rumors, and we talk about, whether we like the rumors, who the Reds should go get, should they make this trade, should they make this signing, what it all is, what we think should happen. But we also need to consider what is most likely to happen. I think we as fans get caught up sometimes in our own beliefs and our own thoughts of how a team should move, that when they move a different way, or when they even move just a slightly, it doesn't even have to be a, complete 180. They could just be going a few degrees away, just a little bit. But because it's not what we thought they should do, we lose our minds. That happened with the Jonathan India trade for a lot of folks. They thought Jonathan India should stay here. He's going to get better. He's the captain of this team, blah, blah, blah. But that's not exactly what is most likely to happen, especially when you could get a pitcher like Brady Singer, when you could get a guy who really solidifies your rotation. That's what the Reds needed more than hoping Jake Fraley lived up to the persona that people had really created for him. I said Jake Fraley. I see Jake Fraley a lot today. Jonathan India. I love Jonathan India, but I could kind of, see him with clear eyes, right? You understood who he was as a player. And I think that's important when we consider all of this, because the Reds have the ability to sign some top outfielders. They're all free agents. They're all available, but they're available to all 30 teams, not just the Reds. So if the Reds don't get them, like i.e. Aroldis Chapman signed with the Boston Red Sox today, were the Reds ever in on him? Probably not, especially for $10.75 million. I just don't see that being money well spent at this point. So when you consider where the Reds are with certain free agents, always remember what's most likely to happen. The Reds could bolster their bullpen with a top arm like Aroldis Chapman, but were they ever going to spend that much on him? No. They spent $8 million a year on Emilio Pagan, and that kind of felt like the tippy top. When you're a team like the Reds and you think that you already have your closer, you already have your bullpen ace in Alexis Diaz, you're not going to go out and spend double-digit figures on a yearly basis for a straight relief pitcher. Some of you are probably thinking, they went out and they signed Nick Martinez, didn't they? But they thought Nick Martinez was always going to win a spot in the rotation. He was going to be a swing guy that he could pitch out of the bullpen, pitch out of the rotation, and he proved them right that he could be a starter. And now he is a legit starter, full on. I don't believe he pitches out of the bullpen next year unless just the best possible thing happens in the world and both Chase Burns and Chase Petty push for a rotation spot. Connor Phillips is ready to go. Rhett Lauder is perfect. Nick Lodolo never gets blisters again. Like, there are some 100th percentile, like perfect world sort of utopian things that would have to happen to move Nick Martinez to the bullpen. I firmly believe that. But like, there's so many things that the Reds should do, according to a lot of people, or they could do. The Reds could trade some young prospects to shore up their MLB roster, whether it be for a power-hitting right fielder, maybe they swap Noelvi Marte for a legitimate third baseman, things like that. They could do that, but what's most likely to happen? The Reds are most likely going to hold on to Marte and CES and see them through. Keep working with them. Terry Francona was brought in to make them better. They didn't bring in Terry Francona to scrap the young roster and bring in a bunch of vets. They brought in Terry Francona to right the ship. They didn't see the development they wanted with David Bell, and they're going to get that, or at least they believe they're going to get that, with Terry Francona. So while there are people out there that believe the Reds should make wholesale changes, that is definitely not going to happen, and it's certainly not what's most likely to happen. So what is that? That's really where we're focused with a lot of our stuff. We're going to tell you, Steve and I will tell you what we believe should happen. And in most cases, we're going to buoy that with what's most likely to happen. Because what should happen is the Reds should sign Teoscar Hernandez, or the Reds should sign Anthony Santander. But what's most likely to happen? It's far more likely that they get a guy like Tyler O'Neill or a guy like Jurickson Profar because they cost a little bit less. And they still check some boxes for them. They don't check all the boxes that Teoscar Hernandez does. I believe that he's the best outfield option out there, outside of Juan Soto, who the Reds aren't getting him. I would love to say that. And I think I tongue-in-cheek talked about this like about a month ago, like, hey, the Reds should go get him. Obviously they should, but this is the real world, and they're not going to give up $700 million to one player. It's just not what the Reds are most likely to do. So we want to bring that portion of this to you. What is most likely to happen? Because while we have Reds-colored goggles for certain things, we are also analyzing this team with clear eyes. 2024 really sort of, I wouldn't say shook me, but maybe it shook me a little bit. I went into 2024 thinking, man, playoffs are assured. We got a run in us. We're ready to go. And that didn't happen. It was a bit of a frustrating thing. So when I thought about that, I was like, well, why? Okay, this is why there's this, there's that, there's all these different reasons. So for us to sit here and tell you that everything is roses right now would be disingenuous. The Reds need to make some moves. What's most likely to happen? How do they make those moves? Are things that we're going to be focused on a lot as we move through the winter meetings. Next week is the winter meetings. So there's going to be hard and fast rumors coming all the time. There's going to be reports of this, reports of that. The Reds are linked to this player. The Reds and Rockies, I'm just throwing that out there. The Reds and Team X are talking about a trade. All of this stuff is going to be out there in the wind. So we're going to tell you what's most likely to happen with all that stuff. And then the Rule 5 draft's going to happen. I don't know if the Reds are going to take anybody. They might lose some players, things like that. We'll tell you about all this stuff where we look at what is most likely to happen for this team, what does happen, how do we feel about it, because there's not perfect moves. That's why I wanted to start this show talking about Jesse Winker and looking at him and saying, no, all right? We have fun memories. But we're not signing memories. We need to sign performance. We need to sign production. And I don't think that Jesse Winker provides those for this team. And that's how we're going to look at the rest of this offseason. I just kind of wanted to lay that out there because there's going to be some folks that whenever we say certain things, we're like, it looks like the Reds are most likely to do this. They're going to be like, well, why do you believe that? Why do you think that should be the case? And I'm like, I don't think it should be the case. That's just me reading the tea leaves. what is most likely to happen based on the Reds' history, based on how they go about things, not based on what we want them to do, because those are two different things in most cases. Sometimes they're right along the way they should be. I thought they should trade Jonathan India for Brady Singer, and they did. I was kind of happy to see that. I thought they should get rid of David Bell, and they did. I never for once imagined that it would be most likely that they would get Terry Francona, and here we are. So there could be some cases where we're actually wrong about that, but we know this team, and that's why we love talking about this team. And that's why we're going to be with you every single day, all throughout the offseason, leading you up to 2025, and what hopefully, not going to say should, although it should, what should be a playoff run, what hopefully will be a playoff run, but the Reds need to do some work to make sure that that's the case. And that'll wrap us up for today's edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast, Talking Reds with me. I hope that you subscribe. That way that you're with us every day, because we're here every single day talking about the Reds. We love this Reds team. And look, coming up later on the show, or later on this week, there's lots to get to when it comes to the winter meetings, what the Reds could be doing, what Nick Krall could be doing during these winter meetings, because it's kind of a pressure cooker for offseason rumors and offseason moves. And hopefully the Reds will be right in the center of that. As you know, some people thought they would be one of the more active small market teams. But thank you so much for making Locked On Reds your first listen today. Now for your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings you a daily look at the rumors and the news and everything going on in baseball. He's going to keep you updated, and he's going to blend it with some humor and good stuff like that. A lot of history references too. Dude's a history master when it comes to MLB or Major League Baseball. So find Locked On MLB anywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. But as for that, Steve will be back here in a couple of days. I'll be back with you tomorrow, looking at maybe getting a guest on. We'll see how that goes. But we're going to keep it Locked On Reds every single day.